Did the Colorado Buffaloes make the right decision at their starting quarterback spot, which was announced yesterday? And could both Kaidon Salter and Julian Juju Lewis play significant snaps against Georgia Tech? Plus, as the practice squad for the Denver Broncos continues to form, which depth players have the best chance and best path to contribute in 2025? All things to come on today's rundown. And I want to begin with the ever-evolving nature of the NFL's practice squad process, which kicked off earlier this morning and will continue into this afternoon. Yesterday was roster cutdown day, where the Denver Broncos, along with their 31 other cohorts, narrowed down their initial 53-man rosters. And this morning, today, we have the beginning of the foundation of the practice squad forming here in Denver. And that includes some notable names that are worth mentioning, including quarterback Sam Ehlinger, who there was speculation perhaps could make the 53-man roster as the third quarterback the way that three quarterbacks did last year. He does not. They waive him and then bring him back on the practice squad. Offensive lineman Calvin Throckmorton, who doesn't make the 8 or so players who made it on the 53 in the offensive line room, but proved to be a veteran pro type of player that could be a serviceable backup and depth piece for Sean Payton if needed. In the wide receiver room, we got Michael Bandy, who is a mainstay for the Denver Broncos as a practice squad and camp body, and inside linebacker Jordan Turner. We also got news recently that Lavelle Bailey is returning back to the Broncos practice squad, while the likes of certain receivers like Courtney Jackson and Jerwan Newton are opting to go elsewhere with interest from other teams around the league. So Michael Bandy comes back. Courtney Jackson, who I really would have liked to see make it back on the practice squad because of some things I saw from him during the preseason, along with Jerwan Newton, not so much. Audric Estime also falling in the not so much category as players who could return to the Denver Broncos. It was reported by our friend and 9 News Broncos insider Mike Kliss that even if Audric Estime does clear waivers, the expectation is that he would not be back with the Broncos on the practice squad, that they would opt to go in a different direction at the reserve running back role. So kind of a full turning of the page for a draft pick in the 5th round from just a year or two ago here for the Denver Broncos, and they opt to take 4 on their roster. And so when we're looking at this Denver Broncos roster in the initial sense of the 53, they clearly went heavy at certain positions and then maybe had a position or two where they're a little bit on the lighter side. On the heavier side, you've got 7 interior defensive linemen, where both Inyoma Uwazurike and Jordan Jackson end up making the roster behind the likes of Zach Allen and DJ Jones and JFM and Malcolm Roach in that interior defensive line room. You've also got 4 running backs. The aforementioned Audric Estime is no longer with the club, but the 4 that make it are Jaleel McLaughlin, Tyler Bidet, J.K. Dobbins, and R.J. Harvey. And then on the flip side of that, in terms of positions that are maybe a little bit light in the depth department, would be like the inside linebacker room, right? Which we speculated on yesterday's show, what the projected linebacker room would look like. And that was the confirmed inside linebacker room, keeping 4 backers with your starters in Alex Singleton and Dre Greenlaw, and then 2 reserves in Justin Cernad and Karene Reed. And Karene Reed, as I've mentioned, continues a pretty awesome streak for the Broncos of 21 out of 22 possible years consecutively. The Denver Broncos have had an undrafted free agent make their initial 53-man roster. And so Karene Reed, who showed some things, some flashes during the preseason, gets the opportunity to be on the 53 over the likes of Lavelle Bailey, who will have to settle for a practice squad designation and potential call-up. You also have Drew Sanders, who is not going to be available and ready for the beginning of the season, but factors as somebody who could end up making it off of IR and onto the roster in the middle of the season, which would cause corresponding moves elsewhere. And that inside linebacker room, to me, again, it gets me a little itchy and a little hesitant to say, hey, you've got 2 starting players who, when healthy, have proven to be, in one case of Dre Greenlaw, top tier talent at their position on the inside there. And then an Alex Singleton, who is a more than serviceable inside linebacker, a tackling machine as described by his coaches, and someone who plays with a similar ball hawking, nose for the football, aggressive nature like Dre Greenlaw. And if every light turns green for the Broncos in the inside linebacker room, boy, does that have a high ceiling. It truly feels like this inside linebacker room has maybe the highest ceiling and the lowest floor of any position group on the Broncos roster. If health is not a factor for Dre Greenlaw and Alex Singleton, who have both been afflicted by the injury bug in recent years and as recent as this current preseason that we're in, and that is no longer a factor in the regular season, this is a unit that could be drastically improved from year-over-year comparisons for the Broncos. And if it's not, and health does continue to impact Dre Greenlaw as he has experienced it recently in his career, and Alex Singleton coming off of a season-ending ACL injury and a broken thumb in the preseason, the depth that they have behind them with Justin Strnad, who did step in and play somewhat admirably during last year's regular season alongside undrafted free agent Karene Reed, who would be in this year's. And even if they get Drew Sanders back, that doesn't, to me, scream a ton of confidence. And I'll acknowledge you can't be overly confident in every position group. There's going to be a weak link in every roster and on every chain that you assemble. And you just have to hope that the strength of the chain or the unit or the team as a whole is great enough to compensate for that. So I think that the inside linebacker room will be something that in these early weeks of the season and in this week or so leading up to the regular season, where we might see some additional tinkering and some of the fluidity that Sean Payton talked about when it comes to the roster manipulation that happens after the initial 53 is set. When you're looking in the world of college football, we got the announcement yesterday from the mouth of Coach Prime himself that Kaidon Salter will be the starting quarterback for the Buffs in week 1 against Georgia Tech. He is, of course, the fifth-year transfer from Liberty, who led the Flames to a 13-win record at the FCS level, and is somebody that has north of 30 games of experience compared to Juju Lewis, who is a reclassified, should be a high school senior right now, collegiate player that clearly has arm talent and the capability to develop into a premier NCAA quarterback, but may not be ready to do that on Friday night when Colorado takes on Georgia Tech. That being said, and again, forgive me if I'm getting a little itchy, because that concept of naming a starter, but also leaving the door open, not just for a succession plan, but for both quarterbacks to exist in a game setting simultaneously, the way that Coach Prime left the door open for, saying Juju knows where we stand on him, and there's significant hope on our end that we get to implement some packages and some things for Julian Lewis in addition to what we have for Kaidon Salter. That strategy bugs me a little bit. We've seen it manifest itself at the NFL level with Marcus Mariota, who mixed in as a backup quarterback with some red zone type of packages. Taysom Hill has done this for Sean Payton to the degree where a Hall of Famer in Drew Brees is being taken off the field to operate an offense with Taysom Hill as the focal point, either as a passer, a runner, or what have you. And I think it's just getting a little cute and gimmicky when you're looking at a Big 12 conference that, yeah, maybe it doesn't have any elite level teams that you just know are going to blow the doors down on the college football playoff landscape and cement themselves as legitimate contenders. But they've got some pretty good teams and a collection of them that is big enough to stand in the way of a team like CU, who is fighting for some of those same things, entering year 3 of the Coach Prime experience, but also dealing with some potential regression elements and setback possibilities, losing your starting quarterback in Shedeur Sanders, losing a two-way Heisman Trophy player like Travis Hunter. And that doesn't even bring up the Jimmy Horns, the Xavier Weavers, the LeJonte Westers, the inability to have an effective run game that we saw last year, and then some adjustments and rotations on the defensive side of the ball. So there's enough good teams, in my opinion, in the Big 12 to still stand in the way of CU and their goal to build off of a 9-win season from a year ago. And I think that's why you have experts in the desert and those nationally and locally projecting Colorado to end up right around that 6 or 7 win mark for the 2025 season. And so if you're going to name Kaidon Salter the quarterback for all of the reasons that are logically stated, he is clearly more experienced at the collegiate level, has like 35 starts as a college quarterback. He has multiple years of being able to grow and develop within an offensive scheme at the college level, and he gives you the best chance to win right now. Then why go beyond the succession plan format to say, hey, we're going to let Kaidon run with this as far as he can, and then Juju can and will take over the way that you might see a Jackson Dart take over for the New York Giants? Why go beyond that to say, hey, no, we want both of these guys to play simultaneously? If I had to venture a guess, it's because of the cutthroat nature of college football and the power that the players have suddenly had thrust upon them, that they can now take their destiny more into their own hands than ever before. And the enticing nature of dangling playing time in front of these players, even a Juju Lewis, to say, hey, don't get disinterested, don't get discouraged because we named somebody else the starter, because we're going to keep you involved and give you action throughout the course of a season so that ultimately you don't transfer away right after we've secured you as a 5-star prospect who has a long runway in front of him. I genuinely think that could be a factor in play here, beyond the fact that Julian Lewis is just not ready probably as a man and as a college football player at 17, barely 18 years old. I think he turns 18 in September next month to run a college football program with all the pressure that's placed upon that at the quarterback position. Beyond all of that, I just think it makes the most sense to run with Kaidon Salter, even if it means you have to put Julian Lewis slightly on the shelf. Now, Julian Lewis may disagree and say, well, there's a lot of teams that are vying for my services, and I can transfer to one of those schools in the offseason. And that kind of forces Coach Prime and company's hand. Whether that's the case, I don't know. But what I will say is, I think implementing 2 quarterback packages is messy for an offense at any level. And with the margin for error that, in my opinion, CU seems to have, even in a year where they may be acknowledging some potential regression and it may be unrealistic with the factors at play to consider them legitimate Big 12 contenders, I still think that they need to operate under the assumption that every game, every week, every opportunity during the Coach Prime era that we are entering year 3 of, for this team to continue to put themselves in a position to fight for that conference championship and put themselves in position to make an expanded college football playoff format, they need to take that opportunity. They owe it to themselves for the money that they're paying Coach Prime, for the money that they're spending and dealing with in a landscape of college football that continues to kind of just boom and explode in this NIL transfer portal era. It's only going to get harder. The deck is going to get reshuffled every single year, and there's no continuity on the game board season to season. So if they feel like Kaidon Salter, who's got 1 year left at the University of Boulder and in college football, to make an impact and give them a chance to build on a 9 and potentially 10-win season in 2025, they need to do that. And mixing in Julian Lewis with all the uncertainty at play and the rhythm disruption that can cause within an offense is not something that I'm particularly a fan of. We won't have to wait much longer to know whether or not that's going to be the case, as the Buffs are set to kick off at Folsom Field on Friday at 6 p.m. local time. And then the week after that, we have Broncos and NFL football beginning for the 2025 season as the Broncos take on the Tennessee Titans and begin a 2-game start to a season that could be pivotal. Just like this Georgia Tech game for CU is going to be critical if they want to get to a 8, 9, 10 win plateau for the season. Winning a sneaky difficult game against Georgia Tech to start the season can go a long way into securing that. And for the Broncos, they will begin the season on a 2-week on-ramp against the Tennessee Titans and the Indianapolis Colts. That is going to be massively important, especially for the offense, to be able to gain that rhythm and connectivity, because the 3-game stretch that follows after that with the Bengals, Super Bowl champion Eagles, and Los Angeles Chargers is going to be a massive tone shift for that season that will help at the course of, week 6, 7, or 8, give us an opportunity to see what this Broncos team could really be about. When we're talking about the larger landscape as a whole, and please feel free to chime in on the comments if and when you can. Love interacting with you guys throughout the course of the program. But when you're looking at the larger landscape as a whole for the NFL and college football with the Buffs, yeah, like I said, there isn't an immediate team that you look at in the Big 12 and go, yeah, that team's going to compete. That's going to be in the college football playoff semifinal. That's a top 4 team in the country. There's not. And there may not even be a top 8 or a whatever, but there's enough good teams in that conference that will muddy the water for a team like CU, who's honestly just trying to keep their head further above water than it was with this kind of rapid ascension they've experienced, going from a 1-win team to a 9-win team in a span of a few years. And then for the Broncos in the AFC West, there's just not a lot of room for error in that conference and division as well, because the Chiefs are planning on returning, to be a formidable product. And as long as they have Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid at the helm, and maybe Travis Kelce for at least another year or so, they're not in theory going anywhere. People were ready to prey on their downfall last year, and they won 15 games. So even if they're the worst 15-2 team in NFL history, they won 15 games out of 17 tries. The Chargers are always going to figure, with the trajectory that they're on and Justin Herbert being at the helm there under the tutelage of Jim Harbaugh, to be a team that threatens for a wild card positioning, even in a division with the Kansas City Chiefs. And the Raiders, who, listen, even if they double their win total from last year, they're an 8-9 team. And so the floor is pretty low. But don't forget how quickly things snapped around for the Denver Broncos when they got alignment from the ownership to the front office to the head coach to the quarterback. For the Broncos, it was not in that order. They brought in George Payton, and then the Walton Penner ownership group takes over the team and moves away from the trust perspective. And then they bring in Sean Payton. That's one of the first to-do items for this Walton Penner ownership group and Greg Penner. And then Sean Payton jettisons Russell Wilson and brings in Bo Nix as a quarterback he believes in and is comfortable with. And once all of those stars aligned, snap. Suddenly the Broncos go from the worst almost decade of football in their franchise history to a wild card berth and a winning record at 10-7. The Raiders, they bring in Tom Brady as a minority owner and somebody who was involved with the construction of the front office, bringing in people that he worked with and was comfortable with from his days in New England and beyond. They bring in an experienced head coach in Pete Carroll, who certainly knows what he's doing at the NFL level and is somebody that is a culture builder, the way that Sean Payton has been for the Broncos. And the first thing that Pete Carroll does is he brings in Geno Smith, a quarterback that he's comfortable with and that he can slot alongside maybe one of, if not the best tight ends in football in Brock Bowers, an intriguing prospect in Ashton Genty. So the AFC West, regardless of whether or not the Raiders still finish last in the division or what have you, or the Chargers maybe take a slight step back as the Raiders take a slight step forward, the AFC West is going to be tight. And that is at the top and potentially at the bottom. So all of these moves that the Broncos are making throughout their 53-man roster in an initial sense and into the practice squad today, as we continue to see names roll in as guys who are, in the case of Sam Ehlinger, sometimes turning down 53-man roster opportunities with other teams to remain in the Broncos system and on that practice squad because of the belief that they have that he has specifically in the quarterback room with Stidham and Bo, the quarterback coach in Davis Webb, who could very well be a rising star in NFL coaching ranks, and then the system and the tutelage of Sean Payton as an offensive mind and a quarterback guru to help him progress and continue his career. And all of these things are leading toward a regular season where things are going to get going quickly for the Broncos with that 2-game start before the rubber starts to meet the road and we find out what this Broncos team is really made of. Thank you all so much for joining me. We are marching toward a massive college football weekend, and we'll continue to monitor everything going on over at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. So stay locked into Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. Keep your eyes peeled at DenverSports.com for the multitude of information that is presented to you there on all of our local Colorado teams. Nobody does football season like Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. And then we've got additional content for you on all of our social channels like YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Wherever you want to consume sports content on social media, we have it there for you with shows like The Rundown here, Denver Sports Daily, Orange and Blue Today with Andrew Mason and Cecil Lammy, and a host of other digital shows available for consumption 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Keep it locked, and we'll see you tomorrow. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.